Good morning, March 24th, 2022, and welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standards live daily show. We run 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time until around 1 o'clock. If it's really interesting, we'll go a little longer. If we run out of stuff to rage about, we might cut it a little shorter. But that's our timeline. We do those every day live, and it's been developing into a really good show. Something I like to remind everybody of as we are live, comments are welcome. In fact, I really like seeing them. I want to see people sending me feedback. I know it's not always positive. That's okay. I got thick skin. And questions, comments, all of that. It's all welcome. And even conversations between each other in the comment scroll. It keeps it lively. It makes it different than recorded shows, canned shows. We won't always address every comment, but we'll try and catch as many as we can. And again, a reminder, though, even if we get worked up with each other, let's try and keep civil. Hey there, Sandy. So, and getting on, I got a couple of good guests today. I got David Clement. He's a friend of the show. He's been on before. He's written columns for the Western Standard. He put one up recently where he's quite critical of where Ron Paul stands on his Ukraine-Russia situation, the way they're looking at that. And David's a very libertarian-minded guy. Usually Ron Paul's sort of supportive thing, but he's got a differing point of view with Paul on this. So some discussion, just a general discussion on what should North America try to do in that horrible circumstances over there. Hey there, Brenda. And then I've got back again, former BC radio host Kid Carson. We were going to have him on the other day. There was a scheduling mess up and he didn't quite make it, but we're assured he's going to be coming on today. I'm looking forward to that. He got canceled. Basically, he had to leave his station. He was very popular out there in Vancouver, but he wanted to talk too much about things such as the pandemic and stuff like that, and pressures from the powers that be moved him along, and he's now on his own. But he's much more outspoken, and I think when we see a lot of these guys in these canceled circumstances, they're a lot more relaxed once they get out of the mainstream world of things. So let's move along here and get on to what's got me triggered today. And a happy birthday from Innisfail from Bonnie to somebody. I haven't had one. Well, I had one recently, but either way, I don't want to talk about that. What's got me going, though, and it's been going through the Senate, it's been going through some other areas, and that's universal basic income. You can call it guaranteed basic income, universal basic income, livable basic income. What we call it doesn't really matter. What needs to be understood is actually what these schemes are. They're moves towards socialism on a massive scale, and they all fit in quite nicely with the goals of the World Economic Forum and their aspirations to bring about a great reset. Let's not forget, just a reminder, Trudeau spoke to the World Economic Forum, and he told the UN he sees the pandemic as an opportunity for a reset. This isn't conspiracy land. This is documented statements from our prime minister. He doesn't see the pandemic as a disaster. He sees it as an opportunity. We have every reason to take this seriously and to be concerned with it. What we've been seeing quietly making its way through the Canadian Senate is Trudeau's words being turned into action. Senate Bill S-233 lays out the framework for a UBI scheme being imposed in Canada. Now, if such a policy comes into being, it'll be the largest expansion of the welfare state pretty much ever seen in the modern democratic world. It'll, of course, be a disaster for citizens as well. I mean, the Liberal government likes trying to bring in major changes through stealth. Think of how they keep flying the idea balloons for a home equity tax through the CMHC, which is the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It's the government arm dealing with home ownership and things like that. They keep spending money studying the issue and building the groundwork for such a tax. Whenever their moves towards stealing the home equity become exposed, though, they vociferously deny any plans on it. Then they resume studying it again to see how they can implement it. How many times have we got to see smoke before we know there's a fire? They use the frog and water technique. Every time we get exposed to the notion, it settles in a little more. There's something that may become a done deal. They're trying to desensitize Canadians to the concept of basically losing a chunk of your home equity. They use the politics of envy and division as well, of course. The studies they commission refer to home equity as being a windfall. And one even said Canadians have won the lottery with this equity and they made their money as they laid on the couch and watched TV. That's the sort of talk they're doing. I mean, we're talking class warfare in a sense. So why are they so desperate to take the home equity from Canadians, though? Well, ties right again into the World Economic Forum plans. You can't control people unless they're dependent on the state. You can't make people dependent if they hold independent assets and wealth. Private property is considered a scourge by socialists. What larger pool of private property is out there, though, besides the equity inside people's homes? The home equity tax idea is one of the things it would take in order to fund a universal basic income program, because that would be huge. We're talking about a welfare program to pay everybody to sit around, theoretically. I mean, there's that twisted notion, oh, people will just get up and work. They're going to work despite having it there. No, they won't. A lot of them are just going to sit around, and we're going to have a lot of career video gamers while the rest of us have to work harder to try and pay for them. Now, they first pitched their UBI plan with a private members bill last year. They know that such bills won't become law, but it allows them to broach the subject again without taking too much heat. Again, it's a strategy of desensitization. Now, with that private members bill now dead, the Liberals have brought it back with a Senate bill. Same sort of thing. Senate bills rarely become law, but it gives the Liberals a platform to promote the concept further and start to lubricate the process to get it through Parliament eventually. I mean, the Liberals already have the state broadcaster working on things on their behalf. The CBC called the CERB program, which was like a universal basic income program, though it was supposed to be temporary. The CBC is calling it a great success. How the hell is the CERB a great success? As Nico brought up, $12 million of it, for example, were sent to foreign applicants with foreign addresses. Like this, it was a mess. It was a disaster, and it's costing a fortune. Inflation's running rampant. We have labor shortages because it messed with the labor markets. We've borrowed so much that our great-grandchildren won't even be able to dream of paying these bills off. CERB is a success if one's goal is to crash and then reset the economy, however. UBI schemes have failed everywhere they've been implemented. The government knows damn well that won't be sustainable in Canada. The problem is we're being governed by ideologues, and not particularly bright ones. Trudeau, Freeland, Guilbeault, they're the top ministers in Canada. It's not a group with a solid grasp on economic reality. It's a shallow group of privileged fools who've swallowed the tripe they heard at World Economic Forum gatherings, and they've managed to convince themselves that they can usher in a new socialist utopia. These vain little people are willing to crater Canada's economy further as they see it as a means to a longer-term end. A government willing to seize the assets of peaceful protesters while enforcing a form of martial law upon bouncy castles is capable of anything. So as inflation keeps skyrocketing, along with energy prices, and Eastern Europe is mired in war, we're seeing just the environment Klaus Schwab has been hoping to see, along with his useful idiots such as Justin Trudeau. UBI is only a step, but it's a big one. Now that the government is bold enough to put it to the Senate, we know it won't be too long before they feel they can work to implement it in full. And we can't pretend we didn't see it coming. The warnings are now. Push back. All right, that's what's got me wound up today. Let's bring our news editor, Dave Naylor, in. I'm sure he's going to have a bunch of good news and things that'll calm me right back down, right?
I just can't believe you didn't shave this morning, Cory.
Oh, I know. I try to look pretty for everybody, but just with everything else, I did take care of the nose hair problem I had, though.
Yeah, maybe the ears tonight?
That's a big task. I'll see if I can get with it.
Jane will help you out.
Yeah.
Busy day in the news again, Cory. Just a little bit of breaking news before I give you the rundown. Our Mel Risdon just finished covering a Jason Kenney press conference in which Kenney announced that Alberta will give $5 million to the Ukraine war effort. He stressed to buy defensive weapons, things like gasoline, night vision goggles, but it's certainly the first time even he could remember that the provinces got involved to sending money to governments who are involved in a war at the time. News that's on the site. We'll start with a good exclusive we had this morning, Cory. The Western Standard has learned that Andrew Scheer, the former Conservative leader from 2017 to 2020, will endorse Pierre Poilievre in his run for the leadership, which will be decided in Ottawa on September 10th. So that's a feather in Poilievre's cap early on in the campaign. Our political reporter, Linda Slobodian, has done double duty this morning, checked in twice. First, the contentious Rimbey, Strathmore, Sundry writing involving Jason Nixon. They finally set a date for their nomination meeting. Tim Hoven is the challenger there. They've changed it a couple times. Hopefully, this will be the final date for that. And Linda also updates the UCP internal investigation into the Chestermere Strathmore Constituency Association meeting that saw the current MLA here, all her supporters cleared out, and Jason Kenney supporters put in. You mentioned the useful idiot Stephen Guilbeault. He was somewhat wrong in testifying at the Commons yesterday. He said that green energy in Canada does not operate with government surpluses. Well, he should have known that the government has given billions and billions of dollars to that sector of green energy. And, was he deliberately lying, or was he just uninformed? I guess we'll have to leave that up to the viewers to decide. We've got a column from Calgary MP Michelle Rempel Gardner talking about proportional representation on the site now. And here's something everybody knew except the Liberals, Cory. GoFundMe and GiveSendGo executives were on Parliament Hill yesterday, testifying that the donations that came in for the trucker convoy were overwhelmingly small amounts from Canadians. And Liberal fears of foreign money leading to toppling the government were just hyperbole and conspiracy theories. So lots of stuff up there already. Lots more stuff to come this afternoon. Just about to put out a oops story of the day. Somebody hacked into the Twitter account for CBC National early this morning and tweeted out a very nasty word. CBC is now scrambling to investigate to find out what exactly happened there. So that'll be going up in just a few minutes from now, Cory.
Great, Dave. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's a word from what I've heard that even I, and when I push the lines online, I don't use that one. That's pretty gnarly to come out of our state broadcaster's Twitter account. As you said, they're claiming perhaps it was a hack. It's got, in my view, more of the smell of a disgruntled employee, but who knows? I'm certain the broadcaster themselves did not want to put that tweet out there, though.
No, exactly. And thank goodness we can never be hacked, eh, Cory?
I sure hope not. But you see, I put out so much crude and nasty stuff, nobody would know if my account was hacked or not anyways.
Right on. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks, Dave. So yes, there's Dave Naylor with the updates on what's going on right now in the news. So there's the reminder, if you want to see those full stories expanded, the details on them from our columnists, our reporters, Eva, Amber, Dave, Melanie. The list is getting too long for me to remember there. Get on westernstandardonline.com/membership. Take out a membership. It's free for 2 weeks to give it a crack. See if it's what you like, and it is worth it. 95% of the people who sign up and take it out realize this is worth $10 a month to me, and they stay on with it. And if you use the code TRIGGERED, coupon code TRIGGERED, put it in, you'll save yourself another $10 on that as well. And if you take it out for an annual membership, that knocks it even down further. So, it's $99 for an annual, and then you get that coupon code with TRIGGERED. Hey, you're paying way less than an old newspaper subscription in the past, and you're getting all of this content, and it's up to date. So please take out a membership. And again, don't be afraid to buy one for somebody else even. Hey, memberships make a great gift. We have corporate memberships too. You can give your staff subscriptions and access to the Western Standard. There are another number of companies that do that, actually. And it helps support us so we can stay independent and keep providing this kind of news. We've been expanding greatly, and we really appreciate those who've already subscribed, and the more we get, the better. As well with our advertisers, and I'm going to hit a quick ad break here too before we move on with some more news talk, and that's Bitcoin Well. In these times of crazed monetary instability and, again, lack of trust with the government or the state institutions like banks, people are looking at digital currencies more than they ever have before. Bitcoin Well, this is a company. It's a Western Canadian one. They're publicly traded. They are regulated. They're safe. They help get you into the world of buying Bitcoin. It's non-custodial. That's one of the things that we have so much talk about. Well, is my money safe? Can somebody seize it? Can somebody take it? Well, for one, these guys, Bitcoin Well themselves, they never have it. You always have it. You control your money. It's your own wallet. Bitcoin Well doesn't have any part of that. That's where some of the scams happen, is if another company gets access to your digital currencies. They just facilitate the process. They're in the middle. And the government can't get at it either. Like if you've got a cold wallet, and I won't go into the full explanations, but if it's a side piece of hardware that holds what contains your funds, it's like your brick of gold under the bed or whatever. The government can't get at it. They can't hack it. They can't steal it. Though there's things you've got to do to maintain it. So go to Bitcoin Well. These guys, what they do is show you what it's all about. They'll educate you better than I can even on how you can safely get involved in the world of Bitcoin and digital currencies. So check them out, guys. It's an Alberta company, and you can get some good one-on-one help with things. So yeah, we got the UCP nomination battle going on. Speaking of politics, speaking of things going on, there's always so much. And it looks like a hornet's nest happening out in Airdrie, Chestermere, because Leila here has been fighting tooth and nail with Premier Kenney over a number of things. Now we've got Jason Nixon looks like his nomination, he might lose it up there in Sylvan Lake area. Like this party is just in turmoil right now. And we're looking at about a year from the next scheduled election date. So they better get it together. I know Rachel Notley is rubbing her hands together and hoping she gets in for another term as our premier. And if the UCP can't figure out what they're doing, there's a very good chance she might find herself back in that seat. So we're going to be watching with interest, that's for sure. It's just over a month until Jason Kenney's leadership review goes on, and whether or not he will actually be selected by members to stay on as the leader of the UCP, time will tell. But we're watching a lot of political machinations, and again, I see some of that irony. Kenney supporters, Kenney's a political player. I mean, he's a career politician. And he's pulling every string and doing everything he can to make sure he keeps that leadership, with things like, fights going on at constituency levels and things that have happened in Leela Hare's area. That might work and win you delegates, but that's the sort of thing that really sours the voters, right? People are sick of that inside play and the dirty tricks and the constant, infighting. We need some leadership, and I don't know if we're going to see it or not. Again, I've always been, before I'd been very supportive of Jason Kenney. I wanted him to win the leadership. I wanted him to get the NDP out. He did manage that, but ever since then, it's been difficult to get his feet stable and underneath him, and we really need it right now. The other thing Dave brought up, was the announcement today that the province is going to send $5 million to the war effort out in Ukraine. It's an unusual precedent. The provinces don't typically get involved in international conflicts like that. I'm certain that some of it's genuine. They're concerned and they care about things over there, but we get a lot of battles on who's in what jurisdiction and who's doing what where, and things like that going on in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. I'm not sure if it's the place of the province to get anywhere more direct than maybe just making statements on those sorts of things and perhaps being facilitative, supportive of the federal government if they're making efforts, but to put money directly into that effort, Alberta tax dollars, I don't mind it going there. I'm of a like mind. I know some people have different views on what's going on over there, but I just don't know if it's the role of the provincial government. But it seems almost it's another experimental means too from Premier Kenney to try and buy more electoral support, a little more love on the federal scene. And I don't know if that's where he's supposed to be going. We got a lot of stuff to take care of right here in Alberta, as I said, not only for his own political fate, but with our own policy issues and things such as that. I mean, he's gotten the high resource prices have taken a lot of pressure off the UCP. We got a balanced budget. He has been talking about reducing some of the fuel taxes. That'll give us a break. We can afford to do that because we are, experiencing a lot of royalty revenue from high prices right now, and Alberta's producing as hard as we can. But starting to dip your toe into the mess over in Ukraine and Russia, I'm just not sure if that's where we want our provincial leaders to go. But that is where they're going, whether we like it or not. We will talk a little bit more about what is the right approach to Ukraine and Russia. There's certainly some very heated opinions on that. We can all sit in North America and make up our views on these sorts of things. And I'm going to bring in my guest, David Clement, to talk a little bit about that. He's a columnist with the Western Standard, as I said, and he's been on the show a number of times. I've known David for quite a while. He does a lot of good stuff, writes some interesting things. So let's talk with David. How you doing out there, David?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Very good, very good. So you wrote your recent column. You're a liberty-minded guy, typically would lean towards supporting things like Ron Paul and libertarian movements down in the United States, but you've differed quite strongly in your column with where Ron Paul went on his thoughts with supporting or not supporting the Ukrainian-Russian conflict, and where it's landing. Perhaps you could lay out a little bit what you wrote on there.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially my argument is that the folks in the Ron Paul crowd are taking the arguments that I made about the war on terror, which were accurate, and the world is a worse place because we didn't listen to them at the time, and trying to recycle them to fit into the conflict that is going on in Ukraine. And I mean, there are obvious differences between the conflicts. We're talking about a war on terror, which is a war on a concept largely held by people in non-government organizations or non-state actors and terrorist cells and things like that across numerous borders and boundaries. Obviously, this is one country invading a democratically elected, or a democracy, one that is attempting to join the EU and embrace, I don't love using the word Western, but for lack of a better term, Western ideals in terms of freedom and markets and trade and civil rights. And so my argument is that they are trying to take old accurate arguments and make them work in this scenario, as if Putin's grievances against NATO somehow justify, or it's somehow reasonable for him to take this action against Ukraine.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of that discourse. We see it from some of our commenters here and things too. I mean, to people to try and paint NATO as some sort of aggressor almost in this conflict. And I mean, there's been always a lot of saber rattling and back and forth. I mean, NATO is stood out as I guess, an anti-imperial Russian force. Now that communism is gone. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is only one of those two forces invaded a country, and it wasn't NATO.
It was not NATO. And if NATO was this warmongering threat that Putin and I would call his useful idiots in Canada and the United States proclaim this to be, if NATO was a warmonger, why did NATO, and I'll exchange NATO with we just for simplicity's sake, why did NATO not go to war when they invaded Georgia or Chechnya or Ukraine in 2014, or what they did in Syria, or even Ukraine now? If war was what NATO wanted, well, the table has been set for war for a long time then. And it's pretty clear that NATO is not the aggressor. And let's also factor in that the idea that Putin would take Ukraine to create a buffer zone between him and NATO. Well, he already borders other NATO countries. He would essentially, if they were to absorb Ukraine entirely and it became part of Russia, well, he would be adding more countries to the border of what is that new Russian imperial state. If he creates a buffer zone and installs some sort of puppet government, which is another possibility, all that is essentially doing is ensuring that Ukraine is the war zone for some future conflict that he envisions. I mean, both of those seem quite silly in terms of why NATO would want to over-cautiously approach this situation in regards to their support for Ukraine.
So if a hands-off approach isn't there, like what approach though should, as you said, the West, for lack of better terms, where should we sit with this though? I mean, there's a lot of differing point of views. I mean, on how far we should go, whether sending money, whether doing nothing, so calling for the no-fly zone. That could be a very big hot button if that's actually imposed. Yeah.
So my take is we should absolutely be using a no-fly zone at the very least as a bargaining chip, and be willing to enforce it. And the people on the other side of this argument will often say, well, that could be perceived as an act of war. That could be something that Putin sees as a clear escalation. But that fails to remember the obvious fact that what is and isn't an escalation is entirely Putin's prerogative. And you could make a very strong case that the sanctions that we are imposing could be very reasonably viewed as an act of war. And I'll just quickly walk you through what the consequence of the sanctions will be, because they are going to be quite damning. So the ruble's crashed. The Russian stock market is non-existent. In the span of a few weeks to a month, ordinary Russians are going to be faced with product shortages, their most basic goods and foods. Even if a country was willing to sell to them, they don't have a payment system to facilitate that beyond what the Chinese offer. Russian companies can no longer receive foreign currency payments. They're entirely economically isolated. Half of their central bank reserves have been seized. Almost all of the Russian domestic industry that produces anything relies on products from around the world as components. And just recently, Maersk and MSC, which are the largest container companies in the world, have said that they won't deliver containers. I would say most planes in Russia within the next month are going to be grounded by virtue of Boeing saying they will not supply parts. Rolls-Royce, who makes the engines, who says they will not supply parts. Both of those companies saying they will not supply service manuals. And so, and then if you look at food, 40% of everything grown in Russia comes from seeds that are imported. And so in the longer term, if this holds, Russia isn't going back to the days of Gorbachev. They're going to go back to the days of full-scale rationing, breadlines, and poverty. And could Putin view that when it comes to it as an act of war and means for escalation? Of course he could. And so we're playing this game of what does Putin not see as an escalation, all while they're bombing civilian sites, they're firing on nuclear reactors, which in and of itself could be viewed as an escalation, and innocent Ukrainians, civilians, and those who are otherwise civilians who've taken up arms are dying in the process. And so I think a no-fly zone is the very least of what we could do, and it's what the Ukrainians have asked, because they've quite courageously said, you defend the skies and we will do the rest. And that's quite a remarkable statement from a country who militarily is nowhere near the size of Russia, and yet that is their request, and that's all they're asking is if you can protect our skies, we will hold them off and we will push them back. And so I think that is the appropriate approach in regards to NATO.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about, it sounds like the long-term sanctions, things like that, in the end, I mean, money talks, and Putin is going to, and unfortunately, the Russians on the ground are going to pay a terrible price for all of these sanctions. But that takes a little while to really take hold and put that pressure on the leadership. In the meantime, yeah, the issue is the Ukrainian people on the ground in this ongoing battle that's killing, again, a lot of Russian and Ukrainian soldiers along with civilians. It's just a bad situation. That how do we end it sooner rather than later and avoid escalating it? I mean, these are all, difficult questions to try to answer, but got to try.
But if you're at the negotiating table with the Russians, which NATO and the Ukrainians certainly are, you create your list of provisions, which, if not met, we enforce a no-fly zone. And once you do that, you have clear timelines and timetables, and then the question of escalation is up to Putin and his invading army in regards to what's next. I mean, the incident last night in regards to the nuclear reactor, it's still unclear what munitions were used, but assuming that they were anything of any serious size, I mean, being 100 or 200 meters away from a nuclear reactor having a direct hit is a pretty clear escalation that would have Chernobyl-like effects if it had struck a reactor and not part of the administration building there, which we don't know whether that was on purpose or a matter of luck, but either way, it's reckless.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope and think, I mean, it was a matter, reckless would be the term, but, maybe some indiscriminate shelling. I mean, it'd be virtually suicidal to hit such a large reactor, and it just wouldn't serve their own purposes very well on any front to cause a meltdown or something as awful as that. But it does illustrate the danger of when you've got an active conflict going on things that could happen, even if unintentional.
Yeah, I mean, and it begs the question on what's next. So what is NATO's line in the sand? I mean, President Biden and others have said that they're not going to commit boots on the ground, and I can certainly respect that, and that's not what I'm calling for in this moment. But there certainly has to be an internal conversation. What if the city of Kiev is shelled and bombarded in the same way that the Russians did in Chechnya or they did in Syria? Would that warrant intervention? Or is it really just only if they touch Poland or Romania or the other NATO countries that border the conflict in Russia that we intervene. I don't know. But we're seeing escalation on the side of the Russian army and Putin, and it appears to be getting worse. It appears to be getting more indiscriminate. It appears to be more focused on civilian areas and instances of reckless shelling with the nuclear reactor. And so I think the conversations need to be had beyond, well, we're not going to do anything unless they touch Poland. I think that there's probably a scenario in between what's going on right now and Russian troops crossing the Polish border where NATO has to do something. And I would argue that a no-fly zone now probably goes a long way to preventing any further escalation to the point where we actually have a full-scale hot war that spills over into Romania or Poland.
Yeah, no, we don't want boots on the ground at all. That would be a terrible outcome. I mean, we got to start looking at the longer game, though. Eventually, this is going to be resolved, whether it's with Putin finally realizing he bit off more than he can chew and backing out, because it does look like he's getting a lot more pressures than he anticipated. Or perhaps he occupies Ukraine and then things calm down there. But there's going to be, we're back into a Cold War circumstance. I mean, it'll be similar to where we were 30 years ago. We're going to see more buildup. And there's some of the irony, as you said, NATO is going to get more funding than they've ever had before. They're going to expand their capabilities. They're going to stock up more on the borders of Ukraine and Belarus and other areas. So this isn't going to calm things in the long run. So we'll still have a longer term problem to deal with.
Yeah, and many European countries have kind of had their awakening moment in regards to their own domestic military spending. The Germans reversed in a matter of 2 or 3 days several long-standing policies they had when they committed to send lethal military aid to Ukraine, when the German chancellor announced that they were going to increase their defense spending to 2% or more of GDP. All things that would have seemed impossible a month ago, and entrenched and not something that you would foresee. And so we will likely see that in other countries in Europe, because we have to remember the reason why did Ukraine want to join NATO? Well, they had this imperial power on their border who had long stated publicly and has viewed that Ukraine should be part of their sphere of influence. And the reason we're in this conflict is not because NATO is some aggressor that is encircling Russia. It's because the free people of Ukraine, decided for themselves that NATO membership was advantageous for them given their circumstances. And based on what we've seen, it was entirely warranted. And so those who argue on the other side of this often forget that this was the Ukrainian people making this decision for themselves in a democratic country for good reason. And I don't think Vladimir Putin gets to have a veto by way of military intervention on the will of the folks in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, it's a large, complicated, and breaking problem at the moment, and it's going to take, again, just a lot of discussion. There's going to be different views. I like to hear as many as possible, and hopefully we can find a middle ground and somehow stabilize this. It took decades to end the last Cold War. Hopefully we can finish this one sooner. So, well, thanks for coming on today, and what else you got?
Yeah, no. I was just going to say thank you very much for having me. This is something that's going to probably dominate the news cycle for quite some time. And I'd argue for good reason, because it is likely only going to get worse for the people in Ukraine who have, so valiantly defended their country in ways that most people watching this show will have no comparison to. Almost zero of us have ever had a moment in our lives where we've had to make the decision of whether or not we were going to put it all on the line. And you have everyone from the 80-year-old making Molotov cocktails to college students who are making that very choice right now.
Yeah, we'll watch and see what comes of it. So we'll look forward to seeing, well, more columns and discourse from you, David. Thanks for coming on to talk to me today, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. And that was David Clement, and then you can find him online as well, and he writes columns here and does a lot of other things. Yeah, so let's, the comment scroll as usual. Some of the squirrels are going squirrely, and that's fine. That's what the scroll's there for, and that's what you can do. It's funny with people going on, oh, it's the WEF line. If you remember, I kicked off this show ripping into the WEF. And so I don't know, which am I? Am I a patsy for the WEF, or am I a conspiracy theory for calling out the WEF? Guys, make up your mind on your conspiracies. You're getting crossover, okay? So the WEF is real. I haven't heard anything from the WEF on this conflict. Maybe there's something out there. They have nothing to do with it. They're an organization I'm concerned about. I'm worried about how they are influencing politicians, but some of the same people cross over from organization to organization, but it's unrelated. And then some of the other garbage with some people talking about how we got to free Ukraine from the Nazis. Oh, kiss my ass. Kiss my ass. Okay, the president of Ukraine is a Jew. And let me tell you a little bit of history. Jews make terrible Nazis. That's pretty well documented, guys. There is some battalion of extremists out there. Guess what? Every country in Eastern Europe has unfortunately an anti-Semitic element. They have some organized groups. They always have. There have been skinheads. There's been the Sons of Odin. They change their names. They do their things. They're always there. But it doesn't dominate the country. And it certainly does not justify having Russia go into a foreign country. They invaded, you guys. Why is this so confusing to you? Ukraine is a sovereign nation. Even if people say that they were corrupt. Oh, so what? God, a quarter of the countries in the world are corrupt. It doesn't justify a neighboring nation invading them. I don't know what world some of you guys are in. They're bombarding them. It's not fake stuff. It's not stuff made up by the MSN guys. They invaded. They crossed the border. They moved in on them. They weren't threatening Russia by any means. And I know it's complicated. I know there's secessionist movements in eastern Ukraine that probably, for the most part, down there want to join Russia. Yes, that's been going on. But, somebody else saying it's not our problem. Actually, in a big world, it is, June. It is, whether we like it or not. How long, and I'll make that comparison. When you got an expansionist state in Europe, how would it have worked if we'd have said, well, when Hitler took Poland, it's not our problem. When Hitler took France, it's not our problem. When Hitler went into Hungary, guys, it is our problem. When it's expansionism, it becomes all of our problem. And we have to address it. I don't agree. I don't think we should send troops over there whatsoever. I don't like the idea of pushing on a no-fly zone. I think that's a big line to cross that could escalate things and make them a hell of a lot worse. I don't want to see anybody else fighting in this thing than already are there. I mean, I do not want to see Canadians showing up. Actually, we've got Paul Hughes. Just a side note, those who might be familiar with Paul, he's a social media personality. He served on Princess Patricia's light infantry in Canada. He's a veteran. He was also he ran the farm out in Calgary, along over by Canada Olympic Park. Winston, oh, you're a sad little man. Either way, I just have to address some of our commenters who clearly have brain damage, like Winston Smith there. So Paul Hughes, though, I listened to him on the radio this morning. He actually went all the way to Ukraine himself. He did put his feet on the ground. And I don't exactly understand what he's planning on doing over there, aside from perhaps getting himself into trouble. I hope he's all right. He's always been more focused on food security and poverty issues than international ones, though, as I said, as a veteran, he watches those things quite closely. And he's over on the ground. And I was asking Eva about that because she's one of our reporters, and she's been a part of the community of Eastern Europeans in Alberta and Canada. And again, it's talking about why we shouldn't care. Some people are saying Alberta has a massive Ukrainian population, or people of that descent. And they're concerned about their relatives over there. They've got friends and family over there. Same with people there's Russian people over here too, who are worried about their friends and family, who are stuck in this war that have gone in there. I mean, there's some propaganda on both sides, but there's been enough of it from enough of these Russian soldiers, and that was the BS line Putin was given before as he built up the armies. Hey, it's just a training exercise. Hey, it's just a training exercise. These soldiers did not know they're going to go in and invade and take over their neighbors in Ukraine. So, they're suffering as well. There's a lot of innocent soldiers on both sides getting killed out of these things. Nico's got my Twitter account up. That's where we can get, of course, a lot more hot discussion on these sorts of things at Cory B. Morgan if you want to follow me on there. Let's talk about, I'll just tone things down a bit and get back to our sponsors then. And let's talk about firearms, though. The Canadian Shooting Sports Association, they've been a long-time sponsor for us, and they've been a fantastic one. The name says what they're all about. They're there as an association if you're a firearm owner or if you want to become one. They've got a lot of resources, videos on safe, responsible firearm use, where there's trade shows where you can pick up firearms, where you can network with other firearm owners. They've got it all. And as a firearm owner or aspiring one, you really should consider joining them. They will stand up for you. And one of their bigger issues as well is that they are they've got a number of legal challenges against the Liberal government right now on behalf of firearm owners. Because again, the Liberals have been constantly recategorizing firearms and making them illegal and then trying to take them away. And they're going to keep doing that. They want to disarm the populace. They want to take away your ability to go hunting, to go target shooting, to collect firearms, your ability to own property. So check out the Canada Shooting Sports Association. So that's where you can stand up for yourself, push back, protect your property. But you got to take out a membership. You got to help them so they can help you. So that's CSSA-CILA.org, or just Google Canadian Shooting Sports Association and you'll find them. Right, so Nico, you do some research on the Azov Battalion, and it's a governing organization. It's neo-Nazis. Yeah. Here we go again. Yes, there's a little battalion full of some guys who wave some Nazi stuff. And apparently they're run by a Jew. If you're going all the way to the top, come on, get real. Again, in every country, you could probably find a battalion full of extremists. It doesn't justify bringing a foreign invasion, guys. It doesn't. I'm sure there's probably 50 or 100 actual dyed-in-the-wool neo-Nazis in Alberta somewhere. Those kooks are always around. Should the Americans invade us? Should Russia invade us? Cut it out. It's ridiculous. Let's get on to some real discussion on this. And then I'm sorry, but Putin's not saving the world from Nazis, guys. He's an authoritarian thug. He invaded a peaceful country, and people are suffering. And that's the bottom line, and we got to bring this thing to an end. Oh, Suzanne, I'm sorry I sound pathetic to you. Reality does suck. All right, so let's talk about some of the stuff Dave was talking about, speaking of things. The Freedom Convoy truckers. Yes, there was that narrative going on for, Hitler was part Jewish. Man, I don't know. I got to resist looking at some of these goofy commenters. Man, it hurts my head. Okay, so they've been talking about the Freedom Convoy truckers, speaking of theories of outside funding and why you should have intervention. Doesn't this sound sort of familiar? The Liberal government used that. They're saying it was a foreign force pushing. I now sound like a Nazi supporter, Suzanne. I can barely begin to tell you why that is just repulsive. But I assure you that in my family, we didn't make good Nazis. You guys are disgusting, some of you. You really are. So now the numbers are in. We're talking about 8, maybe 10% of the funding that went towards the $12 million for the Truckers for Freedom Convoy was from foreign dollars. And a whole pile of that was probably actually Canadian snowbirds down south of the border. So no, this wasn't an insurrection. This wasn't funded by foreign people trying to have somebody take over Canada. This was no January 6th. This was nothing of the sort. And that's what's coming out in front of Commons committees now. This was part of the rationale they used to impose the Emergencies Act on Canadians. The reasoning they used to basically suspend our civil rights, because they were saying we're going to be taken over by a foreign country through funding through this Truckers for the bouncy castles. Apparently were putting the whole government at risk. The occupation of Ottawa was going to be an effort to overthrow. Well, the numbers are showing it's not the case. It was not true. 88% of the funds originated in Canada. 86% of the donors there were from Canada. And that money's still seized. That's not their money. Right? We're going to see a lot of legal things following up on this whole truckers convoy and protests in Ottawa. I mean, this is far from done. They've suppressed it. They've pushed it down, but they haven't been able to justify why they did it. They haven't been able to justify such heavy-handed means against our own Canadians. And those things are starting to come out in the wash now. And we've got to stay on that. We've got to follow up with it. And of course, as I was going on about yesterday, we've still got political prisoners based on this. Tamara Lich is still stuck without bail in jail. And we've got people with their accounts seized. We've got people's lives ruined. We've got businesses that have been shut down. And we need to investigate these things. We need to make sure that this government doesn't get away with this. Speaking of the liars in government, as Dave mentioned and I mentioned earlier, yeah, Guilbeault. This is our big environmental crusader in Ottawa. This is one of Trudeau's top people, his big fella up there. He said that we don't subsidize the production of wind energy. He told that to the Senate on Thursday. So what? The government doesn't subsidize wind energy. This is a senior minister saying this. Well, yes, we do. And he said we didn't subsidize solar energy. And he says that we subsidize fossil fuels. Okay, this BS line from the federal front and Guilbeault, and again, if it was just some environmentalist clown, okay, I can live with that. But this is one of Trudeau's top confidants, and he's claiming that we don't subsidize. Well, right in the middle, I mean, the Green Infrastructure Fund gets $9 billion. $2 billion goes to this low carbon economy fund. Another $1 billion to a smart renewable and electrification pathways fund. $400 million to the Arctic Energy Fund. $200 million to the Clean Energy for Rural and Remote Communities program. $200 million in Climate Action and Awareness Fund. That's not subsidies, Guilbeault. It's billions of dollars, you liar. This is a federal cabinet minister lying right to the face of a Senate committee. And again, he gets away with it. This is the government that's stuck in Canada right now. So yeah, I know as we follow up on the truckers' convoy and what happened over there, I don't hold a lot of confidence that we're going to get too many answers, but I still want our politicians to at least keep up the pressure, media members to keep up the pressure, because we got to find out what happened, what motivated these guys, and how this ended. But yeah, when you see crap like that from Guilbeault, it also, they won't hesitate to just actually lie outright to us when we ask direct questions, and that's concerning. At the very end of the show, I'm going to run a clip from the House of Commons with Pierre Poilievre actually questioning on a very simple question. Some of you might have already seen it online. I was during a Commons committee going on, and he was just asking a minister about the cost of housing in Ottawa. And it's painful to watch this thing with the back and forth, but it's also an illustration of these people that were paying some very healthy six-figure incomes to govern our lives, and how they act like juvenile hammerheads, unfortunately, in our House of Commons. And it's no wonder we're in some of the mess we are right now. I'll wrap up before we get to our guest pretty quickly here. I mean, a lot of this is all tied together as well, and gets back to the World Economic Forum that I started with. You want to talk about another thing to help bring about a crash, but aside from the universal basic income, let's make sure people's housing is screwed up. Let's make sure that inflation helps us crash. Well, our new housing supply is short of demand by 40,000 houses a year right now. That's a federal bank regulator saying that. The government's talking about everything to deal with housing except increasing supply. This is basic economics, people. If we don't have enough houses, the price is going to go up. Why is the government not concerned about this? Well, because they're too concerned about trying to steal our home equity. We are in a lot of trouble, folks. And these testimonies, these things we're seeing, we're seeing the right talk. They're digging into the right issues. But I don't know if it's going to lead to any change. They're not afraid to just BS us, and apparently we're not afraid to reelect them. But we need more houses quickly. Right now, we're needing about 250,000 households a year, and we're creating about 210,000. But we've got a government, I think, that's very determined, that actually wants a crash. They actually want us to hit bottom, because that'll justify them in their extreme moves to, well, reset the economy. Either way, let's talk about the media. There's another area of fun for me. We're going to bring in our next guest. This Kid Carson, he's a radio host was a radio host out in Vancouver, a popular one, and made a lot of news when he parted ways with his employer, essentially over speaking on things they didn't want to dip into. It sounded like I listened to his podcast. I mean, it's not just that, it's not hate-filled and throwing things back and forth, but it was definitely a differing of opinion, and they had to part ways. But I mean, I'm certain Mr. Carson can explain it much better than I. So let's bring him into the show here. And hey there, how's it going, Mr. Carson?
How are you, Cory? Nice to see you.
Yes, good to see you. I've been listening to your podcasts, but I get to meet you face to face here somewhat, I guess, in a virtual sense. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. What a time to be alive, brother.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, for a guy like me who makes a living out of ranting, I mean, they give me lots of stuff to work with, so I should be thankful for that. But it's pretty miserable for the rest of the people having to live through it.
I feel the same way with content for my podcast. I'm never going to run out. We've got a little bit of a journey ahead of us, I think.
Yeah, well, and you've sort of changed formats. So, I mean, just to give some background to people who aren't familiar with you, you'd been in media for some time, but you were with more of a music format station, but you'd still speak, on issues and things in between, right?
Yeah, I mean, I introduce songs on the radio. It's not a very complicated job, and part of my job is to connect with the audience and speak about things that are relevant, and but a lot of silliness as well as the stereotypical morning radio show DJ giving away money and playing fun contests. But part of connecting with your audience is reflecting what's happening in the world, and it started to get to the point where I wasn't able to um, speak about the things that were going on. And at that point, you start to feel like your audience is going to perceive you as being disconnected or out to lunch or with your head in the sand. And then I started to realize the media landscape around me is like that. And I didn't want to be a part of that. So I'd really hoped that I could sprinkle in a little bit of what we call the truth to my audience. And anytime I did, the reaction for me personally in my Instagram with DMs and emails and messages and tweets was phenomenal. However, it obviously didn't fly very well with the management.
No, and that story's common in a lot of areas. And I mean, and you didn't even go, in my view, terribly deeply into issues in that. You just, express some things, break up some shows. And we see that trend a lot. Like I listen to a lot of music, but I'm a talk radio listener, or at least I used to be a lot, because that's where I get a lot of political things when I'd work, I'd listen. And that's where you'd expect to hear that kind of discourse and things. And it has gone to crap, to be blunt, because talk show hosts are afraid of shaking things up. I mean, that used to be the basis of things, is exploring concepts and policies and going into them, and not necessarily agreeing. But we've seen, I don't know if you're familiar with Danielle Smith. She was a host out here in Alberta. She ended up so many clashes with the station management, she had to quit. She's on her own and sort of podcasting now as well. But it's those pressures that keep coming on, and it's unfortunate because we're getting a very dull vanilla world of discourse out there, and it's to our detriment.
It's a very strange time these last couple of years because as a media personality, we have coaches and consultants that come in and tell us how we can grow our audience. And one of the big things that I was always told is, yeah, if you can ruffle the feathers and get people to react, if you can make someone laugh, that's powerful. But if you can make someone cry or get angry, that's also really powerful. And so I always I dipped into those sort of bag of tricks when I'd be introducing, sort of silly topics, and you try to divide the audience. You try to polarize people so that they're intrigued and interested in the conversation. But suddenly these topics that have come up with the pandemic, it's like, if you even go there, if you ruffle those feathers, you're shut down. And it starts to make you really feel uncomfortable in your stomach. You think, well, why can't I engage in these conversations? People want to. I mean, we're all on Instagram. We can see the conversations happening. We can see the mothers, debating in their Facebook groups whether or not they should get their kids vaccinated. I wanted to be able to present both sides of the story, and but you're just not allowed to. Like it's almost creepy.
Well, it is. I mean, there's always been a push. I think there's always been human nature in some individuals that they would rather just shut down contrary opinion than debate it. And that's just natural. But they never had so much power, it seems, as they have today. I mean, before they could scream and try and shut people down, but it wouldn't happen. But I mean, the term is cancel culture, and it's very real. And it's shutting things down. I mean, you don't have to agree with somebody. You should be able to debate it. I mean, if they're that far off the edge, if they're that wrong, talk about it. Don't shut them down.
Mm-hmm. Especially when there's so much evidence to show there's another opinion that's very valid. The cancel culture is not just for media personalities and censoring people on Instagram. It's like doctors that are coming out, scientists that are coming out. They're being shut down. It's a very, I just interviewed a guy yesterday that's going to be on my podcast probably later today, Dr. Stephen Pellick from University of British Columbia. This guy is like, I mean, imagine a simpleton radio host trying to interview a scientist at a university. It's not only intimidating, but my mind was melting with what he's telling me. And he's like, these facts that I'm sharing with you are out there. Everyone knows what's happening. So him reading the mainstream headlines, I mean, he's beside himself that, this information is in front of Bonnie Henry. It's in front of all the other people making these decisions. Yet they're choosing to hide it, bury it, and ignore it. So, dude, I don't know. I don't know what's next, but all I know for me personally, I couldn't just sit by and become the guy that looks oblivious or out to lunch, although I've been interpreted in a few different ways. I see that there is an insatiable appetite for just some authenticity, for some truth, and for being curious. It's not like I know all the answers, but I'm curious. I want to know why it's so weird that I would want to present another opinion. Why is that a bad thing? So if we ask more questions, if we get involved in just honest, mature adult debate, that's where we need to go.
Well, and as you pointed out, I mean, there's an audience for it. I mean, I don't know how often I get it as well when I've gotten a good guest on and they talk and people say, "Oh, I am so happy I was able to hear that. I can't hear this person anywhere else. I find them on YouTube. I see them on Twitter, but you don't see them on CTV or CBC or any of our main outlets anymore." I mean, the people want to hear it. And it's showing, I mean, it's giving me hope, though, because we're finding ways to bypass it. I mean, to look at the biggest example in North America has got to be Joe Rogan. I mean, there's people are livid with him. And, Rogan himself has rarely actually said too many controversial things. It's guests that he's brought on, which, again, right or wrong, he's there to ask them. He's inquiring, and it's putting it out there. But people don't even want that discussion to happen, and that's distressing.
Joe Rogan is arguably the greatest content producer on the planet right now. His ratings are, I think, I don't know, like 11 million a day, 11 million
incredible.
people, and just dominating mainstream. The next guy to go solo will probably be Tucker Carlson, because his ratings are, and he's fantastic at what he does, 3 million a night compared to 11 million with Joe Rogan. So it's only a matter of time before he goes independent and more people end up doing that. It's disappointing though, Cory, because there's something magical about mainstream. I don't know if it's nostalgia, the way we grew up with it and it was always the truth. It's frustrating to not see your beliefs represented in mainstream media, because there's something to it. It almost validates it in some way. Validates it with your friends, your neighbors, your family members, coworkers, that you matter, that your opinion matters. And when it's not in mainstream media, you end up feeling like a crazy person. Like, I've looked at myself in the mirror going, I wish I didn't know what I knew, because now I'm like a nut job. I'm the mayor of Nutsville. So when you have someone, and that's what really motivated me to, although it was short-lived, to say something on the radio that's public, that's mainstream, that's a pop music station, playing Bruno Mars and all the rest, is that for so many people, it was like, oh my God, this opinion was represented in the mainstream. I'm not crazy. And of course, now I'm off in the corner doing a podcast, but the way that people have found me and reached out and said, "Yo, thanks for at least it was, even if it was 1 or 2 blurbs on the air, you gave me a little bit of hope," So yeah, you're right though. It's great that we can find ways around the mainstream. I think people are waking up, especially after what happened in Ottawa. The trust has been lost, and people are going to be seeking out truth tellers wherever they are.
Yeah, well, and people are gaining a new audience, and some commenters are already saying they'd listened to your podcast with the accountant. It was very widespread and appreciated by people. I mean, it sounds like it'd be dry subject matter, but no, it's very actually engaging. I mean, if you're talking about an audit of a downtown business or something, maybe it'd be a little dull, but we're talking about some big dollars and some crazy stuff going on the front, and nobody else is talking about it. And people are happy to hear somebody is.
That's a great episode, actually. Even when I'm interviewing these people, sometimes I wonder, is it going to be dry? That guy was great. And the episode is called "What Happened to the Convoy Money" on my podcast channel. But I mean, this guy was in the room. He's describing how people are coming in with fist loads of cash after the GoFundMe and the Give, Send, Go accounts were shut down. People were showing up in Ottawa and just throwing money on a stage, and volunteers are like picking up the cash, coming in, and that they don't even want to touch it because they feel guilty or they don't want to be there. There's just so much love in the air. So people come in and dump the cash on a table. And then this accountant guy's like, okay, bundle it up into envelopes. So let's hand it out to the truckers. I mean, what he saw behind the scenes it's so interesting. That's so far my most listened to episode. People just love it. But he really gives an insight into Tamara, and who is still, I believe, in jail without bail. He gives a real insight into how she got involved, and it wasn't really meant to happen that way. She was just starting a fundraiser to help the truckers, because of her savviness on social media, she ended up becoming the face of the convoy, which was never meant to be her thing. Anyways, it's a fantastic interview. I'm glad that your audience has checked it out. That's cool.
Absolutely, and we're getting voices out that couldn't get there before, and I think the mainstream really overplayed themselves a lot over this whole convoy thing. I mean, it was actually, I got to admit, in a self-serving sense, for the Western Standard, we gained more subscribers in this last month than in many months of effort before. I mean, we'd been doing well, but it spiked us because people, and the same thing we were hearing from them. Oh, I just can't turn the TV on anymore. I can't open the paper. I mean, I watched that CBC one when a host was implying that there was Russian involvement in the money going to the convoy. Like, this is our state broadcaster, you guys. I mean, come on.
It's become like TMZ in a sense.
Yeah, and definitely an agenda. I mean, there's always been some media bias. That's reality. There's leanings, but to get so flagrant, it really soured people. I think they overplayed their hand. Another area, though, that we see a lot, and now that you're moving into that world with podcasts and things, is they used to call them the intellectual dark web, and it's tied in with Joe Rogan and Peterson and Gad Saad and a lot of those professors and such. They're from universities. They've been canceled in their own schools quite often, and that's another disturbing area, because this is the next generation coming up, and they're getting an incredibly slanted worldview as they go through higher education. But at least these professors aren't just canceled and shunted out. They're actually getting out and bypassing the filters of the mainstream media and the filters of their educational institutions, and they're reaching a lot of people.
It's shocking. I've been a Joe Rogan fan for a long time, and don't agree with everything. You don't ever agree with everything that someone says, but I mean, in my opinion, that guy always held his guests' feet to the fire. He's got a producer. He's famous for his catchphrase, pull it up, Jamie, on the screen, or whatever. He's got a producer in real time. Okay, you're saying that's a fact. Let's pull up the document. Where is it? Tell us the website. They pull it up. They review it in real time. I mean, his interviews often go for 2 or 3 hours long, because he is fact checking as he goes. And I think a lot of his apologetic tone lately is because now that he's really moved into the mainstream with the Spotify deal, he's no longer on the fringe. In the fringe, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Once you're in the mainstream now, people come after you. So, he's had to really lately in the last few weeks be much more balanced. And I can even hear the way his interview style is. He's very, very smart the way he does it. It almost seems like he's arguing against his guest, but to draw out more of the facts, So he's a genius. It's no doubt. No wonder that he's at the top of his game and the number one broadcaster now in the world.
Oh yeah, I mean, he's a great interviewer. I mean, for people who haven't listened to his shows, I mean, part of it, what's subtle with it is he's genuinely engaged. That's what's making it worth listening. And he's not going to overrun his guest. He's curious. He takes his questions where they will take him, because he's genuinely wants to get an answer out of it. Doesn't mean he agrees with the guest, but he's pulling more information out of them, and he's very good at it, and it makes it a good listen. I mean, I couldn't pull off a show for 3.5 hours. I would bore everybody right to tears after after an hour and a half. They're already starting to drop off on me here. So for him to actually gain followers and make such an engaging thing, and again, these platforms didn't exist 20 years ago. There was no such thing as an independent show that could be so long and so in depth. And like I said, it's a frustrating time, but it's an exciting one. I mean, the whole world is open to new views now, and it's going to be hard to stop us.
Yeah, even for myself. I mean, thank God technology is where it is now, where guys like us can reach the world and reach thousands of people. A few years ago, I would have been dead in the water for expressing my views, and maybe I wouldn't have had the courage to say something, to be honest, because I have 3 kids. I have a 4-year-old, I have an 8-year-old, and a 17-year-old stepdaughter, and my number one job is to provide for them. But with people now, I mean, my Instagram account has been steady around 30,000 people for a while. And then after this, within less than a week, I jumped to, I think I just passed 70,000. And for me, I can't even, it's mind boggling. I don't know how real famous people do it with their millions of followers. My 70,000, I'm trying to message people back, and it's just, and I had basically a lump in my throat for the first 2 weeks nonstop. I mean, legit, like getting teary-eyed reading some of these messages. It has made me feel, although I've lost my job, and that's a whole another scary topic, it has made me feel like I'm getting paid in love. I know that sounds a little corny. I feel more relevant now these last 2 or 3 weeks than I have for the last 2 years on pop radio. So I'm just going to take my run, yeah, Joe Rogan's a huge inspiration. I want to kind of follow in his vein of truth telling and curiosity, like you mentioned, interview some voices that aren't getting exposure. So I am revitalized in my passion for broadcasting. I'm excited. And there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of territory, and probably a lot of weird things are going to happen over the next 5 years. As I watch your show, yeah, what's up. There's a lot of things. The stage is being set for some weird stuff to go down. And I'm honored and privileged now to be one of the voices out there trying to spread another point of view.
Yeah, well, it's good to hear from you and humanize, and make some people realize as well that not every person who's in the mainstream media or was in the mainstream media is evil or infected or bad. The institutions themselves, I think, are rotten to the core, but a lot of people within them, a lot of the people who make up the Western Standard actually are former mainstream media writers and producers and such. They've left that, but landed here. I mean, there's some, as you pointed out, I mean, you still got to fear for your own job. You got bills to pay like everyone else. We have a talk radio show host in Calgary who I used to really, really enjoy. He's just really, again, gone so flatline and dull. I can't handle him anymore. I know he hasn't changed, but he needs to keep his job. Yeah. And he's got a young family, and he doesn't, not everybody can necessarily make the leap into a new platform or format. I mean, social media, it's a scary jump, and you've made that jump, and so far so good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time it's station management. They're terrified because the people who are loudest on the keyboard, the keyboard warriors, I remember the first time I even mentioned that I didn't like wearing a mask. Now the full conversation was, I will wear a mask, in the early days, I'll wear a mask to protect my neighbors. I don't like it. And the keyboard warriors came out, and just my boss came in the next morning with thousands of emails. People were so upset. And I thought, wow, that's crazy that now you can't even express that you don't like wearing a mask. Like, we're not supposed to like it. We're not supposed to rush out and get a mask that matches our outfit. Like, it's not supposed to be a fun fashion accessory. This is a crappy thing that we've got to cover half our faces. But even expressing that you don't like something like that gets a certain type of person really riled up, and that really freaks management out. So then, although they're not bad people, they don't want to lose ratings and lose advertisers and sponsorships and money ultimately. So then they end up telling everyone to shut up. So you're right. Good people end up keeping their mouths shut for a variety of reasons. And my hope is that, more people in mainstream will just start to stand up a little bit. I don't know if it's behind closed doors and try to talk to their managers and go, guys, like we need to stay relevant here. And the people out there, they want to hear another side. It's getting a little tacky now that we can't stand up and have another point of view. I don't know how that's going to happen, but we can just hope.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I mean, a lot of the mainstream, they're not making a lot of money in those organizations, radio stations, newspapers. It's not like it used to be. So they got to start re-examining themselves. The model isn't working. You're competing now with things like the Standard, like your podcast, even Rebel and other things are coming out there. There's substitutes, and streaming music, of course, is really cutting into radio stations. So maybe shutting down, discussion is the wrong way to go if you want to retain audience with unique content, but they aren't ready to look that way yet. Maybe that'll come as they get more desperate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of old school systems need to crash and burn before they're rebuilt. And I don't know what that looks like, and it's kind of a scary, nerve-wracking thought. We all want to be comfortable, but I think over the next 5-7 years, I think it could be very interesting. Lots for us to talk about.
Most certainly. Well, I'll let you get on with it. I'm looking forward to seeing more of your podcasts and your interviews now that you're unrestrained and settling into the new world of alternative media. It's as I said, it's a tough realm to get into, but the world's your oyster, right? Like you could, I think somebody else referred to you as perhaps the next Joe Rogan or the Canadian Joe Rogan. I mean, that's the bar to aspire to for sure.
Someone called me the Walmart Joe Rogan.
I'll just start. Hey, there's a lot of money in Walmart.
Hey, I was still flattered. I'll take it, man.
I'm not above buying stuff from there now and then. Hey, times are tight.
Thanks for the time today, man. It was really nice to connect with you.
Great, thanks. So where can we find what you're doing and what you're up to? I saw some of that in the background there, just to remind everybody and the people listening on audio, how can we find Kid Carson and your shows going forward?
You can connect with me at kidcarson.com. There's a link there with all my podcast episodes and ways that you can support. And yeah, I mean, I'm flattered by all the great response so far. And yeah, I'm on all the platforms, Apple, Spotify. I am doing video podcasts. I'm not like you. You look very comfortable behind the mic, the camera. I've been a radio guy forever and never had to worry about what my face looked like if I had my double chin exposed. So now I've got the camera set up. I'm doing these podcasts in video, which you can watch on Spotify. And that's another whole thing I'm trying to conquer.
Well, I'm certain you will. I mean, you get used to it more as you go. With me, it's just a matter of age. I'm not so worried about things like when I was in my 20s. I'm happily married, and my wife puts up with how I look now, so the audience can deal with my shiny forehead and bad hair.
Yeah, got a little shine there. See? Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy style in there. All right. Well, no, it was really great. I hope I get the chance to talk with you again soon down the road, and I really want to see your podcast take off. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Cory. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. So yes, that was Kid Carson, and check him out. It's a good, and I like seeing these new podcasts taking off, as you can see, and as the commenters just loved them. We can see that. I mean, I know you guys don't hesitate when you don't like my guests to let me know about it. Well, if you can still hear me there, Kid, they're all thrilled with you, and I assure you, this is a critical crowd. They're hollering at me half the time, but as I said, I mean, I'm crabby. I go on about things, but I'm optimistic at the same time. We're seeing technology and communication moving in ways that they never did before. Danielle Smith, who I brought up as that local example, you know, she got pushed off of regular radio, but she's resurfacing on a number of different areas to talk. The cancel culture, and that's where it gets tougher in mainstream media. You know, when they went after Danielle, it wasn't just complaints about her. What they did was went after her sponsors. They would phone up, you know, the car dealers and things like that and say, we will never come to your place. We'll picket your place. They threatened everything. You know, if you keep that host on the air, it was actually very troublesome and disturbing. A lot of it came about because of Danielle interviewing a UCP candidate, and she had gotten demonized as a supposed racist, and she wasn't. It was a bunch of BS. It was a character assassination. And I'm forgetting her bloody name for some reason. I've had her on this show. Either way, she started a charter school. I'm sure her name's going to come back to me pretty soon. Brilliant woman, actually. Very brilliant. And Danielle interviewed her when the character assassination was going on. It turns out she had like a stalker, essentially, who was leaking a bunch of private conversations out of context to make her look bad. It was terrible. It was terrible what they did to her. Danielle interviewed her, and there were so many complaints just because Danielle talked to her that QR77 took Smith aside, and she was spanked by the program manager, and they pulled the archived interview off of the radio archives. Like, it was absolutely ridiculous. There we go. Thank you, Jane. Yes, Kaylin Ford. There we go. Can't believe I'm forgetting that name. If you want to know a number of brain farts I tend to get quite often, names. I don't know if I hit my head when I ski jumping one too many times on the wrong spot, but I have a hard time with names sometimes. So Kaylin Ford, she was just terribly treated by the mainstream media and by people in general. But for Danielle Smith to even dare interviewing her, and it wasn't Smith saying right or wrong. She just had her as a guest. The people went haywire. What a terrible, terrible trend. So we see people like Kid Carson, though, and what I like is, okay, he's not fading off into the wilderness. He's not gone. He's jumped onto a new platform. It's got to be scary. He's got a young family, as he said. You know, he's got to have to find new sponsors, subscribers, whatever way it goes. Same thing here with the Western Standard. You know, Derek and Dave made a big leap, and everybody who got this thing going, and the subscribers are holding that up, and that's how we're paying our bills. But we're showing the mainstream isn't the only way out. You know, there is alternatives. We can develop those alternatives. We can talk about those different messages and still have the conversation. Another thing I do fear, though, is information overload. As we know, there's a whole lot of BS out in the internet as well. I mean, as some of the commenters point out, they think what I'm spreading on some issues is, that's fine. Well, except for the ones calling me a Nazi. I don't put up with that. But, I mean, you do have to be more careful. It puts a lot of responsibility on you. You have to look at your sources. You know, is this a good publication? Are they really putting out a real story, or is it BS? I mean, that's just to beat our own drum at the Western Standard. That's why we do have a core of real reporters on the ground. We have somebody in Ottawa. We have somebody in Edmonton. We have Dave here who maintains those news standards. He was a newsman for decades. We don't just cut and paste press releases and put them into stories. We fact check. You know, Mel is chronically on the phone, phoning sources and confirming things. That this is the new media and this is the way things go now. And we can build that. But there's a lot of them that don't. There's a lot of new media outlets, and I'm not going to knock specific ones. There's some great ones out there, and I've got nothing but respect for Rebel and True North and Post Millennial and the things they're doing. They all have their things. But there's some that are just horrific out there, and you got to watch for them. That's all. Just take some care. I'm going to move on to a little more news chat, but I'm going to talk about my sponsor one more time. Speaking of us paying the bills, and that's Bitcoin Well. That reminder, these guys, they're powered by, partnered with Power ED by Athabasca University to make a free online curriculum about Bitcoin. So if you go to bitcoinwell.com/learn, you can enroll in what they call Bitcoin Academy, and they'll teach you about it. Like I said, a lot of what keeps people out of the digital currency world is just not exactly knowing what it is. I mean, it does sound strange, this alternative currency. I mean, I grew up with dollars and cents and everything. Bitcoin Well, these guys lead you through it. That's their thing. They are a Western Canadian company that's there to facilitate you and lead you into that world so you're comfortable. You know that your funds are safe, and you can get involved in that world. The way you're going to feel more comfortable is with more education. They've got corporate plans. You can pay your employees in Bitcoin, a portion of it. It's voluntary and so on. We do that here at the Standard. I get a portion of my check comes into my Bitcoin wallet. And there's actually a matching program. It's one of the most generous things I've seen out of Derek. And trust me, he's not always that wide open with the wallet. But it's a good plan, actually. It's nice for employees. A number of us have opted into that. So check out bitcoinwell.com. These guys have some interesting services, and they can keep you rolling in the digital world. Okay, on to the federal front a little bit. Yes, we got the Conservative Party of Canada leadership. They've set the date. It's going to be September 10th. When they are going to announce their new leader. They've adopted those rules. It's their third leadership race in 6 years. And, maybe they'll find the right one. I don't know. Again, it's a longer conversation as to why I'm an independent supporter, because I do feel the whole system's broken. And the video at the end of this show is going to kind of demonstrate a little of that. But in the meantime, somebody's got to lead the party. And, the Conservatives typically at least are less bad than the alternatives. That's unfortunate that we have to settle that way. But either way, the candidates have till April 19th to send in their applications, and it costs $200,000 to get in. So this is not just for your run-of-the-mill grassroots person to get involved. And of course, it's going to cost you a lot more than that to make the run. And there's a refundable deposit, assuming you behave correctly. Now, that's not too far from now. It's a month and change. But I'm hoping, right now, and I like Pierre Poilievre. I like him a lot. But he's the only one officially in so far. Jean Charest's kicking tires. I think he's going to go for it. But the best thing with a race is to get as many candidates as possible, get in there, make it a race, sell those memberships, share those ideas, make it competitive. A blowout is never good for anybody. And that deadline's coming up pretty darn fast. So hopefully some more entrants come into this race right now, because again, if Pierre walks away with it, I won't be the saddest person on earth, but I think they would have lost the benefit of having a good competitive race like that. And the House of Commons, speaking of the Conservatives and how sick they are, I want to talk about that a bit. They had a vote, and I think there's a story on that in the Standard, to bring in a policy, because Quebec's been whining. You see, Quebec isn't growing as fast as Alberta. Alberta's growing fast because, hey, man, it's Alberta. We want to live here. Quebec isn't growing that fast because, hey, come on, bitter people and poutine. There's only so much you can embrace. So there's some great things in Quebec, too. But they said, hey, we're going to lose seats, because our seats in Parliament are supposed to be based on population. We're going to lose seats now, and Alberta's going to gain a handful of seats due to the new rejigging for the population. Well, we don't like that. We're screaming about it, and the Bloc put a motion forward saying, let's stop that. And they won. That motion got through. Alberta's going to get screwed out of their seats, and Quebec's going to get more. That's not so shocking out of the Liberals and Bloc and NDP, because they're a bunch of socialists, and they all thrive on kissing Quebecois butt. But most of the CPC MPs supported that motion as well. Many, at least. I don't know if it was most or not. But yeah, there's a lot of Conservative Party support in that too. So that's where the system shows and how broken it is, guys. And that's why, again, I look at Western independence. See, no matter what party you get in there, their lips are locked on Central Canadian voters and at the direct expense of the West. Michelle Rempel wrote that column Dave was talking about. She was talking about proportional representation as perhaps a means for... she references that vote as well in her column, actually. I'm not a big supporter of proportional representation, but it's another concept of things. It could give more strength to regional areas. It's worth examining. I think, well, for one, changing the electoral system, I just can't see the government ever getting the will to really do it. And I'm just not sure if that'd be the best way to go. But at least she's talking about it. But right now, when we can just keep overriding our whole principle of even having representation by population across the country through votes in Parliament, we know how often the West is going to get screwed in these policies, which is essentially 100%. can't get out of it. And the Conservatives were no better for us in that vote than anybody else. And well, I shouldn't say that because some of them voted against that. Probably all the Western Conservative members. Maybe it's time for the Maverick Party to be that one, because at least they wouldn't split themselves on that. They would say pretty clearly, no, you keep our seats in the West because that's the way the bloody system works. The system doesn't work. That's what the truth of it is, and the mainstream media system is starting to stop working. So just to show that, I'm going to play a video before we wrap things up, and I'll chat shortly after that video. Nico's going to throw that on because let's see our six-figure paid House of Commons workers in action. Let's see the progress they're making and how they're standing up for us in there. Have a look.
Questions for the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity, who is a member of Parliament here in Ottawa. What is the average cost for a home in the city of Ottawa?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my title is the Minister of Tourism and Associate Minister of Finance. I'm sure my honourable colleague across the way knows that. But let me say, Mr. Speaker, 156,000 jobs.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
The Minister of Treasury Board can help by telling us the average cost of a house in the nation's capital.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to say 106% of jobs have been recovered since the lowest point of the pandemic.
Member for Carleton.
What is the average increase in house prices since this government took office in 2015?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada's economy contracted by 17% between February and April 2020, the largest and most sudden contraction in real GDP since the Great Depression, and we're already back.
Well, Member for Carleton.
Just the average house price?
The Honourable Minister.
5.5 million Canadians lost their jobs, and they're all back.
Member for Carleton.
And what would they pay for the average house?
The
In
Minister.
2020, unemployment rate had more than doubled from a pre-pandemic level of 5.7% to a record of 13.7%, 6% now.
Member for Carleton.
I think there's a problem with the audio in the chamber. The question was, what is the average cost of a house in Canada today?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government has made historic investments in housing affordability, and we will continue to do so.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
And how affordable are such houses?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government has made historic investments in housing. We will continue to do so that housing is affordable for all Canadians.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
If so, how much have house prices increased since this government took office?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let's talk about how it is possible for people to afford their houses with good employment, and that's why employment income fell by an unprecedented $28 billion during the pandemic.
Honourable Member for Carleton.
Is that agonizing or what? Yeah, as Jason Fisk says, seriously, we pay for this? Yeah, that hundreds of thousands, as a matter of fact, to those individuals, and of course, millions and millions and millions. I mean, question period, committee questions, they rarely give good direct answers, and the Conservatives can be just as bad. Jason Kenney can be just as bad answering direct questions. Stephen Harper used to play some of those games in question period as well. But just even get up, rather than get up and down. So arrogant. They're so arrogant that he just would not want to give an answer to a direct question on principle. He didn't want to say to Mr. Poilievre, even, look, we got a committee looking at the local prices, and I'll get back to you when we've got those numbers, which is still a non-answer, but at least to address, acknowledge that he asked the question. But they're so arrogant, so self-centered, so feel that they don't have any obligation to answer questions from other elected officials that they will stand up and stonewall like that in our House of Commons. Again, I don't have a lot of faith in fixing Canada up. I really don't. When these are our representatives. And again, the Liberals aren't the only ones guilty of it, but they're the worst for it. And of course, we see it when Trudeau gets up with his idiocy. He'll get up and toss out word salad to a couple of questions and then run off and hide and let junior ministers take care of everything else in there after that. But man, this is just painful. Such a serious time. Real estate really is an important thing. Claudette's saying what, oil's at 116 a barrel now. Yeah, we've got a lot of things on our plate to be concerned about. And these are the ding-dongs we got representing us in Ottawa. I worry about that. So one last time to remind everybody, take out a membership with thewesternstandard.com. If you haven't already, by all means, please do. It keeps us going, and you will. It's just, we're not asking for a donation. We're asking for a subscription. You will get access to all of those columns, news stories, and the whole works without the paywall. It's well worth it, and we appreciate everybody who has so far. I got a good show coming up on Monday. Speaking of the oil prices, people familiar with Dan McTeague? He's from gasbuddy.com. He always speaks on those issues. He was a Liberal member of Parliament in years gone by, but back when Liberals actually, there still were some principled ones among them. He's far from the current Liberals of today. He's nothing like that. And we're going to talk energy prices. He's got a lot of I told you so's coming up right now because he's been warning us about this energy crisis, and that's what it's turning into. It's coming up on us really soon. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble. Of course, I really want more people to get to Rumble because we never know when these mainstream sort of alternative media outlets could shut us down. So thank you all for tuning in today, guys. I'll see you all on Monday at 11:30, and we'll review the weekend's events and kick off another week of news. So talk to you then.